Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we have, well, a monumental stack of global reports in front of us. And honestly, they feel less like just daily headlines and more like, I don't know, like the blueprints for the next decade.
They really do.
We're going to be moving at speed from the microscopic world of human biology and some incredible health breakthroughs, all the way up to the massive political flashpoints that are right now defining the future of Europe and the United States.
It's an enormous scope. And I think the one consistent factor we see across all of these different domains is just volatility. It's constant change.
Right.
We're not just seeing incremental progress anymore. We're witnessing these foundational shifts, especially, I think, in science, space, and technology. So to give you the most valuable insights, we've decided to prioritize those areas first, the high-impact changes.
Before we wade into the geopolitical stuff.
Exactly. Before we navigate the, let's call them the highly turbulent waters of global geopolitics and market dynamics.
So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We want to give you a comprehensive, a balanced, and, well, a deep understanding of these key global developments.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of this, you should walk away feeling truly well-informed, equipped not just with the facts, but with the context to understand why they matter. Whether we're talking about a new antibody or, the cost of a museum ticket.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's jump right in with a medical breakthrough out of Germany. This is one of those stories that could just fundamentally change how a major global epidemic is managed. I'm talking about some pretty astounding news in HIV research.
This is genuinely monumental. The news is coming out of the University Hospital of Cologne, and the researchers there have identified and tested an antibody. They're calling it O4A06.
O4A06.
Got it. And its performance in the lab tests has just been, well, it's been beyond what many people in the field even thought was possible right now.
So what are the numbers? I heard they were impressive.
They're incredibly impressive. This one single antibody neutralized 98% of the HIV variants they tested it against.
98%.
98%. And this is the critical part. This included variants that have already demonstrated resistance to our current existing antiretroviral treatments.
So even the so-called super strains, the ones that have evolved to evade our best drugs.
Exactly those. And what's so fascinating here is the mechanism. It's not just about, overwhelming the virus with force. It's much more elegant. It physically blocks the virus from performing that key step of binding to and entering the host's immune cells.
It's like it changes the locks on the cells.
That's a perfect analogy. It's like installing a highly sophisticated, unpickable lock on the cell door. And if this can be translated effectively into clinical practice, it paves the way for something called passive immunization.
Okay, passive immunization, that's the key phrase here. So for everyone listening, why is that shift from, say, daily drug cocktails to a periodic injection? Why is that so incredibly significant in a global health context?
Because the single biggest hurdle in managing the HIV epidemic, especially in parts of sub-Saharan Africa and, other developing nations, is treatment adherence. Just getting people to take their pills every single day.
The logistics of it must be a nightmare.
It's a logistical, economic, and social nightmare. Daily medication regimens are just so difficult to maintain because of cost, getting the drugs to remote places, and of course the social stigma that's still attached to the disease.
Right.
So if a patient only needs a periodic injection, maybe once every few months, or an infusion, it just drastically simplifies the entire treatment protocol. This isn't just a medical breakthrough, it's a potential political and economic shift.
How so?
Well, it could fundamentally change the pharmaceutical distribution models. It could reduce the stigma. And you have to remember, despite all the progress we've made over the decades, we're still seeing roughly 630,000 AIDS-related deaths every single year.
Still that high? Wow.
Still that high. This discovery, this antibody, offers genuine hope for finally, maybe, eliminating that tragic figure.
That is profound. Absolutely profound. Okay, let's move from viral DNA to our own cellular power plants, the mitochondria. There's some new research connecting damage in our fundamental biology directly to the process of aging in common diseases.
Right. This is a really deep dive into something called cellular senescence, which is basically, when our cells get old and stop working properly, Researchers have discovered a very significant and specific type of structural damage to mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA.
mtDNA, so the DNA inside the mitochondria, not in the cell's main nucleus.
Exactly. And when this specific damage accumulates, it seems to make the mtDNA less flexible. And as a result, the cell either flags it for destruction or the cell itself enters this kind of toxic, dormant state.
And this accumulation of damage is now being strongly linked to the conditions we all just sort of associate with getting older.
Precisely. We're talking about direct links to diabetes, to major neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, and to that pervasive, low-level age-related inflammation that causes so many problems.
It makes sense. I mean, if the energy source of the cell, the mitochondria, is constantly compromised and suffering these structural failures, it's easy to see why the body's entire system would start to break down.
Or why aging accelerates. It's a foundational problem.
But I'm genuinely curious about this.
Yeah.
Why is the DNA in the mitochondria so much more susceptible to damage than the DNA in the main nucleus of the cell? It seems like a design flaw.
That's the critical piece of the puzzle that this new research really helps solve. The mitochondria are these high-energy factories, and the process of producing that energy respiration, it's inherently messy. It generates huge levels of what are called reactive oxygen species.
Oxidative stress.
Exactly, oxidative stress. And unlike the nuclear DNA, which is very well protected and has all these robust, sophisticated repair mechanisms, the mtDNA just doesn't. It's more exposed and has fewer tools to fix itself, so the damage just piles up much, much faster.
So what's the exciting part? Where does this lead?
The exciting implication here is that therapeutic strategies might now focus not just on, treating the symptoms of aging, but on actually preserving the structural integrity of the mitochondria itself.
So you're talking about slowing decline at the actual cellular level.
Potentially, yes. It's a whole new avenue for therapies aimed at healthier aging.
That is a remarkable field of research.
Yeah.
Okay, let's pivot from aging to a very modern and very strange medical paradox. Something called cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, or CHS. And this is a really great example of where, market enthusiasm is just completely outpacing regulatory science.
It is entirely paradoxical, just like you said. I mean, for decades, cannabis has been widely known and used as an antiemetic.
Right, it stops you from feeling nauseous. It helps cancer patients going through chemo.
Exactly. It prevents nausea and vomiting. Yet, in emergency departments across the U.S., doctors are seeing a 10-fold increase in cases of CHS, and it's predominantly among young adults and adolescents.
And is this linked to just any cannabis use or something more specific?
It's very specific. It's directly linked to prolonged high-potency cannabis use. We're talking about the highly concentrated THC products, the oils, the dabs, the edibles that are so common now.
And the symptoms sound just awful.
They're debilitating, it's cyclical, so it comes in waves, it's recurrent, and it's this uncontrollable, severe vomiting. Plus acute abdominal pain and this unrelenting nausea.
Do we know why it happens? Why something that's supposed to stop nausea suddenly starts causing it?
We still don't fully understand the mechanism, but the leading theory is that long-term saturation of the body's cannabinoid receptors eventually disrupts the gastrointestinal tract's entire regulatory system. It flips a switch and reverses the antiemetic effect.
And the defining and frankly bizarre irony here is the temporary relief method that patients are seeking out.
Yes, the compulsive hot water bathing. It's one of the strangest symptoms. Patients often report finding temporary relief only when they're in a very hot shower or bath.
Why on earth would that help?
We're not entirely sure, but this behavior is so common that it's actually become almost a diagnostic clue for CHS. It suggests a really complex physiological connection involving the skin's thermoregulation systems and those same cannabinoid receptors.
This whole issue just highlights a significant regulatory failure, doesn't it? The rapid legalization of these high-potency products seems to have happened without the public health messaging to go with it.
Absolutely. The medical facts are very clear. The only established cure for CHS is complete and total cessation of cannabis use. But the public health crisis is being fueled by this market dynamic, where products are becoming exponentially more potent, and the regulatory framework for public health warnings has just lagged severely behind.
So it turns what's presumed to be a medical benefit into a severe and poorly understood public health liability.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Okay, let's connect the environment to our lifestyle choices now. We've got a study on air pollution that should, frankly, make every outdoor runner and cyclist just stop and think.
A massive, decade-long global study found that pollution can essentially erase the benefits of your workout.
This is one of the most sobering findings in environmental health we've seen in a long time. The study involved over 1 million adults, and the conclusion was that long-term exposure to high levels of fine particulate matter.
That's the PM 2.5 stuff, right? The
Right.
really microscopic particles.
Exactly. The really tiny stuff that gets deep into your lungs and even into your bloodstream. And long-term exposure to that significantly diminishes the positive health benefits you get from regular physical exercise.
So let me get this straight. You could be clocking miles every single week, building up your muscle and your cardiovascular endurance, but if you're doing it in a highly polluted environment, the detrimental effects of the pollution could actually outweigh all those hard-earned gains.
That is the alarming implication, yes.
Mhm.
The constant exposure to PM 2.5 introduces this systemic inflammation and cardiovascular damage that directly counteracts the positive physiological responses you get from exercise.
So you're fighting a battle on two fronts, and the pollution might be winning. It could be. And when you look at some of the extreme examples like reported air quality index or AQI breaches of over 400 in cities like Delhi in India, I mean, this shifts from being a sort of abstract policy concern to a daily life-altering calculus for millions and millions of people.
So the message isn't stop exercising.
Oh, definitely not. We shouldn't abandon exercise, but we have to be far more strategic about it.
What does that look like?
Well, this research really mandates policy change, first of all. We just need cleaner air, period. But it also demands individual adaptation. It means checking the AQI before you go for an outdoor run. It means shifting your workout indoors on days when AQI levels are high.
Or just getting out of the city center.
Or relocating your outdoor activities to areas that are far removed from major traffic corridors or industrial output. The goal is to maximize the benefit of the exercise without inviting the severe internal damage from the air you're breathing.
It's a whole new layer of planning for something that should be simple. Okay, moving to something a little easier to control. How do you get the most out of your workout when you do go? Performance science has a very simple fix for this, and it all revolves around the warm-up.
Yeah, this is some really practical science. It confirms that a proper preparation, a proper warm-up, instantly boosts muscle speed and power.
Oh, what's the mechanism?
The primary mechanism is simply increasing your muscle temperature. And you can do this through dynamic stretching, so movements that take your body through a full range of motion, or even through passive heating.
Passive heating, like a hot tub.
Exactly, like a hot bath or a sauna before the exercise begins. It gets the muscles warm and ready to fire.
I've always heard that the warm-up should mimic the main event. Is that really the key?
It is the crucial takeaway for maximizing your efficiency. Your warm-up movements must closely mirror the demands of the main workout you're about to do.
Why is that so important?
Because that specific movement pattern maximizes what's called neuromuscular coordination. You're essentially telling your brain and your muscles exactly how they need to communicate for the intense activity that's coming up. It greases the pathways, making the overall movement faster, more efficient, and more powerful.
So no more static stretches before a run.
Not if you want peak performance. You want dynamic lunges, high knees, things that mimic running.
Right, makes sense. Let's wrap up this health section with the simple piece of nutritional advice that apparently has some big cardiovascular consequences. Don't skip breakfast.
It seems so basic, doesn't it? But the research connecting breakfast habits to blood pressure is actually quite compelling. Habitually skipping breakfast is strongly linked to having high morning blood pressure.
And why is that morning meal so critical for hormone regulation? What's going on there?
Well, when you skip breakfast, your body goes into this prolonged fasting state, and that triggers all sorts of hormonal imbalances to cope. Then, when you eventually do eat, and it's usually a late, heavy lunch, it can lead to these rapid, sharp insulin spikes.
A roller coaster.
A total roller coaster of hormones and glucose. And that puts immediate and sustained stress on your cardiovascular system, which increases your long-term risk profile for heart disease and stroke.
So the advice is simple.
The advice is incredibly simple. A balanced start to the day with some whole grains, fruit, and protein helps regulate your blood sugar and maintain stable, healthy blood pressure levels throughout the day.
All right, we've talked about our current biological state. Let's look back now at our collective ancient history. We usually rapid fire through archaeology, but I want to slow down and focus on a couple of truly compelling finds that offer huge insights into the ancient human perspective.
Great.
Let's start with this incredible discovery in Central Asia, the lost city under Lake Issyk-Kul in Kyrgyzstan.
This is one of those stories that just sounds like myth turned into reality. Lake Issyk-Kul is in the Tian Shan mountain range, and for years there were these vague historical references to a city there. Now, researchers have confirmed it. The remains of a submerged city are down there.
So what makes this particular city so important historically? Why is this a big deal?
It's location. It's all about location. This area was a critical trade artery, a real nexus point connecting east and west on the Silk Road.
A hub.
A major hub. And the artifacts they've discovered confirm it was a sophisticated, thriving civilization. They've even identified the remains of a 13th century Muslim necropolis, which highlights its deep cultural and religious significance over a long period.
And the speed of its demise is also a lesson in, I guess, geological instability.
Indeed. This wasn't a gradual process of the city being slowly drowned by a rising lake. The historical accounts and the geological evidence they've found strongly suggest that the city was just swallowed after significant seismic activity, probably a massive earthquake sometime in the 15th century.
Wow. Gone in an instant.
Pretty much. It's a powerful reminder that these great trade hubs and ancient centers of power were always fundamentally vulnerable to the whims of natural disaster.
Okay, now let's turn to North America and some ancient murals that have been found spanning the regions of modern-day Texas and Mexico. These murals apparently speak to a shared understanding of the universe among early Native American artists.
This is fascinating. These murals, some of them are up to 4,000 years old, and they are a powerful testament to what experts are calling a shared cosmovision.
A cosmovision. What does that mean?
It means this isn't just about technical artistic skill, though that's impressive too. It's about a shared cultural insight, a shared philosophy about how these different societies viewed their place in the universe.
And what are the elements that define this cosmovision? What are they painting?
It's the holistic integration of everything. You see celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, stars, woven together with complex mythological narratives and the earthly landscapes that they actually inhabited.
So it's all connected.
Everything was interconnected. It reflects a cultural worldview where the spiritual, the terrestrial, and the astronomical weren't separate disciplines like they are for us today. It was all one single unified experience. It's a much more integrated way of seeing the world than our modern fragmented academic approach.
A more holistic view.
Absolutely.
All right, let's leave the ancient world behind and look to the future. Specifically, let's go to Mars, where NASA has made a really surprising discovery about Martian weather.
This is genuinely groundbreaking stuff. NASA, that's the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, their Perseverance rover, which is equipped with an instrument called SuperCam.
The one with the microphone.
The one with the microphone, exactly. It's been listening, and it has detected these distinct electric crackles in the audio it's recorded. And scientists believe this is very strong evidence suggesting lightning strikes on Mars.
Now, why does lightning on Mars force a fundamental rethink of the planet? It seems like a small detail.
Because the Martian atmosphere is incredibly thin. By all our previous models, it was far too thin to support the kinds of dense vertical cloud structures that we associate with lightning here on Earth.
So it shouldn't be happening.
It really shouldn't. We knew that the big dust storms on Mars could generate some static electricity, but confirming actual lightning strikes means the electrical activity and the weather systems on Mars are far more complex and probably more violent than we had modeled.
And that has real implications for future missions.
Huge implications. This is vital data for designing future manned missions. An unexpected electrical discharge is a major hazard you need to plan for.
Sticking with rare celestial objects for a moment, the analysis of an interstellar comet, 3I Chulas, is apparently yielding some unique insights.
It is. Whenever an object visits us from outside our own solar system, it's just a scientific gift. It's a free sample from far away. An analysis of this comet, 3I Chulas, reveals that it has some very unusual chemistry. The mix of elements is different, and this suggests it was formed using different cometary building blocks than the objects that coalesced around our own sun.
So it's a glimpse into how other solar systems are made?
It's a rare, unadulterated glimpse into the planetary formation process, yes. Beyond our own neighborhood.
We're also getting a much better look at the supermassive black hole at the center of our own galaxy, the Milky Way. That's Sagittarius A star, right?
Sagittarius A star, or SGRA for short. And we're getting this new look thanks to the James Webb Space Telescope, the JWST.
And what is it seeing?
Its infrared capabilities have captured just unprecedented detail of these powerful energy flares being emitted by the black hole. These flares are absolutely essential to study because they represent the most extreme physics imaginable. It's the black hole interacting violently with the surrounding gas and matter it's pulling in.
So it helps us understand the engine at the center of our galaxy.
It enhances our understanding of the complex, violent dynamics that govern the very center of the Milky Way.
Now let's talk about a more terrestrial issue that's impacting our access to orbit. There was an incident at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan.
Right. The Baikonur Cosmodrome, which is operated by Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, suffered some significant launch pad damage after the liftoff of the Soyuz MS-28 mission.
But the mission itself was a success, thankfully. It carried 2 Russian cosmonauts and 1 NASA astronaut, and they successfully docked with the International Space Station, the ISS.
That's right. And that successful docking really highlights the continued, and I would say necessary, U.S.-Russia collaboration in space, despite all the severe geopolitical strains happening down here on Earth.
But the damage to the launch site is a problem.
It is a significant concern. Baikonur is Russia's primary launch facility for human spaceflight. And while Roscosmos has vowed to expedite the repairs, the incident raises some very tangible concerns about the stability and reliability of future manned missions launching from that critical site.
And while Russia is dealing with infrastructure issues on the ground, NASA is getting ready for its Artemis moon missions by essentially taking their new moon suits for a swim.
Slight chuckle. That's a pretty good way to put it, actually. NASA astronauts are actively training with what's called the Axiom Extravehicular Mobility Unit, or EMU.
The next-gen spacesuit.
It's the next generation of spacesuit, designed specifically for the lunar environment. And yes, they conduct test swims because being underwater, that immersion, helps to simulate the challenging microgravity and mobility demands of walking on the lunar surface. It's the best analog we have on Earth.
So it's all about preparing them for the complex tasks they'll have to perform during the actual Artemis missions on the moon.
Exactly. They're practicing for the real thing.
Okay, let's shift focus to autonomous systems being used here on Earth, specifically in defense technology. And we have some pretty concerning reports about significant failures coming out of testing that was conducted by the defense tech firm Anduril Industries.
Right. These reports, which were initially highlighted by the Wall Street Journal, they detail that more than a dozen of Anduril's autonomous drone boats malfunctioned during a critical Navy exercise off the coast of California.
A dozen. That's not 1 or 2 glitches. That's a pattern.
It is. And when you're talking about military systems that sailors' lives are going to depend on, a dozen failures in a single exercise raises some very serious safety red flags.
I would imagine it did.
It absolutely did. It prompted immediate safety concerns among the Navy personnel who were involved in the exercise. However, the company's co-founder, a man named Trey Stevens, he offered a counterpoint. He defended the setbacks, calling them an inherent part of the development process.
But isn't an inherent part of the development process a bit of a dangerous corporate excuse when we're talking about active war systems? This is critical infrastructure. What kind of liability is the company taking for potentially putting sailors' lives at risk during this iterative development phase?
And that is the absolute core of the challenge. The military is pushing and pushing rapidly to integrate these new autonomous systems because they believe they need them for future operational superiority.
So they need it fast.
They need rapid iteration. The company argues that you have to accept some early failures to achieve eventual, robust success. But the Pentagon and the sailors on those ships, they need that success now. And they need assurances that these early failures are contained and don't introduce catastrophic risk into real-world scenarios.
So it's this tension between speed and reliability.
Exactly. And that tension is defining the entire future of military technology procurement right now.
We also have a major geopolitical technology story playing out in Vietnam, this one regarding their 5G networks.
Right. The Chinese telecommunications firms, Huawei and ZTE, have successfully secured crucial 5G contracts in Vietnam. And this move is significant because it really highlights the warming economic and technological ties between Vietnam and China.
And this is all happening in direct opposition to Washington's stated security concerns about these very firms, and of course amidst rising U.S.-China tensions.
Precisely. The U.S. has imposed tariffs. It's tried to dissuade its allies from using Huawei and ZTE gear, citing major security concerns about potential backdoors for Chinese intelligence.
But Vietnam went ahead anyway.
They did. And Vietnam's rationale appears to be largely pragmatic and cost-driven. The Chinese firms offer a far more economical and rapid solution for accelerating their nationwide 5G network rollout, and that's a major domestic economic priority for them.
So it's a balancing act.
It's a classic balancing act. This decision underscores Vietnam's complex strategy of managing relationships with global powers. The U.S. is a major trading partner, but China is, for them, an essential and affordable technological enabler right next door.
Okay, let's dive into what is perhaps the most defining regulatory fight in the U.S. right now. The regulation of artificial intelligence. It seems to have just devolved into a chaotic federal versus state clash.
The problem is fragmentation, total fragmentation. For some time, the federal government had a moratorium on regulating AI, and when that was lifted, states just rushed in to enact their own legislation.
And that creates a patchwork.
It creates this patchwork of differing laws that is an immense and incredibly complex compliance burden for any company that operates across state lines.
It sounds like a total compliance nightmare. I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm a tech company operating in, say, California, Texas, and New York, I might have 3 completely different definitions of what constitutes algorithmic bias or what my obligations are for consumer data protection.
That's the reality they're facing. And to compound this fragmentation, there are reports indicating that the Trump administration is currently drafting an executive order specifically aimed at limiting these state-level regulations.
To force a single standard.
The goal is to force a unified national standard, yes.
But the state advocates are arguing that Washington is too slow, it's too bureaucratic, and it's potentially too beholden to the big tech lobby to create laws that truly protect citizens on the ground.
And that's the core of the resistance. The states argue that they need the flexibility and the speed to tailor laws to their specific public safety concerns, particularly around issues like algorithmic bias in local policing or in job hiring practices.
They're worried the federal standard will be too weak.
They fear a unified federal standard will be a watered-down, lowest common denominator law that prioritizes innovation over robust ethical protection for consumers.
So if you step back from the details, what does this legal and political showdown really mean for the business environment and for the precedent it's setting?
This is a test case. It's a test case for how we regulate all future disruptive technologies. The market desperately needs a stable regulatory framework that somehow balances rapid innovation, which demands flexibility with consumer protection and real accountability.
Right now we have neither.
Right now, the uncertainty is a challenge for business investment, and it leaves consumers completely unclear about what legal protections they actually have against the potentially harmful deployment of AI systems. The precedent being set here will govern the next generation of technology.
All right, moving into geopolitics. The situation between Ukraine and Russia remains just a grinding, seemingly intractable stalemate, especially when it comes to peace negotiations.
It is a classic example of mutually exclusive demands just driving conflict stability. There's no room for compromise. Russian President Vladimir Putin is publicly doubling down on his demands for territorial concessions and is accusing Ukraine of fighting to the last Ukrainian. That is his non-negotiable floor for any talks.
And Kiev, of course, refuses to cede any territory.
Exactly. Ukraine's chief negotiator, Andriy Yermak, has explicitly stated that under President Volodymyr Zelensky, there will be absolutely no territorial compromises. The 1991 borders are the goal.
But the external pressure on them must be immense.
It is. An undisclosed U.S. peace plan has reportedly surfaced, and the details that have leaked suggest that it calls for Ukraine to withdraw from disputed areas, significantly reduce the size of its military, and permanently abandon its aspirations to join NATO.
NATO being the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Correct. And in exchange, they would get some sort of security guarantees.
But this U.S. plan is clearly causing a rift with key European allies.
A major rift. European backers, particularly in Eastern Europe, are insisting on full NATO membership for Ukraine and are firmly rejecting any notion of territorial compromise. Some have even gone so far as to suggest the potential deployment of foreign peacekeeping troops on Ukrainian soil.
Which Russia would see as a massive escalation.
A provocative, major escalation. They would see it as NATO entering the war.
And all of this political turbulence is now being compounded by a massive internal corruption scandal in Kyiv. And it involves that same chief negotiator, Andriy Yermak.
This is a major, major destabilizing factor at the absolute highest levels of Ukrainian governance. Yermak, who served as President Zelensky's powerful chief of staff and was central to all peace negotiations, has now resigned.
Oh, why?
He resigned following searches of his home and his office by agents from NABU, that's the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, the country's highest anti-corruption body.
And what was he linked to?
He was linked to a kickback scheme involving the state nuclear power company Energoatom.
The implications of that are profound.
They are. The Kremlin, through its spokesman Dmitry Peskov, immediately seized on the scandal, noting that it raises serious concerns about the stability and the integrity of Ukraine's entire political system.
So the critical question here is really a two-sided coin. Is this an internal crisis that Russia can successfully exploit, using it as proof that Western aid is just funding a corrupt system?
That's one side, yes.
Or is this a necessary, albeit chaotic and painful, step toward accountability that Ukraine absolutely must take to preserve the credibility it needs to secure future Western financial and military aid?
And I think the answer is that it's both simultaneously. Accountability has to happen to maintain international trust and support. But an investigation targeting the most powerful non-elected official in the country during an existential war for survival creates a very dangerous level of internal political fragility.
So the stability of Kyiv is now as much a military concern as it is a governance concern.
I think that's exactly right.
Adding to the internal tensions within the European Union is this fierce debate over how to handle the frozen Russian state assets.
Right. The European Commission has proposed using the approximately 185 billion euros in frozen Russian assets as collateral. The goal is to use that to secure an interest-free loan for Ukraine to cover a significant projected budget shortfall they're facing.
But this proposal has met with some substantial resistance.
Yes, particularly from countries like Belgium and Hungary. The Belgian Prime Minister, Bart De Wever, warned that seizing or even just using the assets as collateral poses significant legal risks under international law.
And he had another concern too, didn't he?
He did. More importantly, from a diplomatic perspective, he argued that it removes a critical bargaining chip. It takes away something that could be used to bring Russia to the negotiating table in the future. Furthermore, Hungary just went ahead and vetoed the initial aid package outright, dramatically increasing the internal friction within the EU over its Russia policy.
Finally, on this front, Latvia's foreign minister is calling for a major shift in NATO's cyber defense strategy.
The foreign minister, Baiba Braze, is pushing for European NATO members to adopt a much more proactive stance. She's emphasizing the need to move beyond just passive defense and to seriously contemplate joint offensive cyber operations to counter alleged Russian hybrid attacks.
So hacking back.
In essence, yes. And NATO is taking this very seriously, with plans to establish an integrated cyber defense center by 2028. It reflects the formalization and, frankly, the escalation of cyber warfare as a primary domain of modern conflict.
Let's shift now to the Middle East, where we have some deeply disturbing reports that necessitate a critical investigation into military conduct in the West Bank.
Yes, video evidence has been circulating that shows Israeli forces killing 2 Palestinian men in the city of Jenin. And crucially, the video evidence appears to show these men were attempting to surrender. Their hands are visibly raised at the time they were killed.
And the international reaction has been one of severe condemnation.
The Palestinian Authority immediately labeled the action a war crime and a summary execution. This was strongly echoed by the United Nations, which condemned the apparent execution as brazen.
But there is another side to the story being presented.
There is. And we must impartially report that an Israeli minister reportedly defended the soldiers' actions. This really illustrates the deep, deep chasm in perspectives and interpretations of the rules of engagement within this highly complex and volatile conflict.
But regardless of the perspective, an incident like this just underscores the severe fragility and tension in the region.
It does. This incident highlights the urgent necessity for critical, impartial investigations into military conduct to ensure adherence to international law, especially concerning the treatment of individuals who are attempting to surrender. The perception of justice and accountability is just vital for any hope of de-escalation.
Meanwhile, regional hostilities continue to escalate, evidenced by some deadly explosions in Damascus, the capital of Syria.
Reports have confirmed at least 10 fatalities in those Damascus explosions, and some international monitoring reports have labeled them as possible Israeli war crimes. This indicates a very dangerous ongoing escalation of cross-border conflict that pulls in other regional players and just increases the risk of a broader war.
And on a more human note, we saw the release of a Palestinian-American teen who had been in detention.
Right. Mohammed Ibrahim, who is 16 years old, was released after 9 months in Israeli detention. He had been arrested in the West Bank, alleged to have been throwing rocks at Jewish settlers. His case really highlights the immense international pressure and scrutiny concerning the treatment and detention of minors within the Israeli judicial system.
Okay, let's pivot to the Americas, where U.S. President Donald Trump has authorized naval assets into the Caribbean and announced impending action against Venezuela.
President Trump authorized the deployment of the USS Gerald R. Ford and other naval assets, and very significantly, announced pending action by land against Venezuela. The stated rationale for this aggressive posture was targeting drug trafficking, with the operation being labeled as counter-narco-terrorism.
And this action immediately created a sharp division among the Caribbean nations themselves.
Absolutely. The Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, she publicly supported the aggressive U.S. tactics. But this contrasts starkly with the position of CARICOM, the Caribbean community, which promotes the region as a zone of peace.
And others have spoken out as well.
Yes, 10 former Caribbean heads of government also actively voiced their opposition to any military intervention in Venezuela.
And domestically, here in the U.S., the public seems a bit skeptical of this military option.
Indeed. Polling suggests that a majority of U.S. citizens actually oppose military intervention in Venezuela. And this complicates the administration's rationale and increases the pressure on the government to provide some very concrete evidence of the narco-terrorism threat that would warrant such a high level of military engagement.
Across the Atlantic, European defense strategies are undergoing a dramatic recalibration. This is really symbolized by France reintroducing national military service.
President Emmanuel Macron announced the return of compulsory national military service. It's projected to last for approximately 1 year, and recruits will receive about €800 a month in pay. This move is a direct response to what he termed a looming Russian threat.
So it's part of a much bigger trend.
It's symptomatic of a broader, very serious European shift away from that post-Cold War peace dividend mentality and toward a renewed focus on military readiness.
But the UK's cooperation with Europe on defense seems to be hitting some post-Brexit friction.
It does. Talks for the United Kingdom to join the EU Defence Fund have apparently broken down. The reports say it was over a disagreement regarding the financial contribution or the fee that the UK would have to pay.
And that's a significant hurdle.
It's a significant security hurdle, yes, because it jeopardizes UK defense firms' access to crucial funding and collaborative defense projects. It could hinder coordinated, European-wide security initiatives.
And finally, on this global tour, India's defense strategy is highlighting its continued reliance on a decades-long partner, Russia.
That's right. India is in the process of procuring 300 additional Russian-made S-400 surface-to-air missile systems. That's a deal valued at approximately $1.2 billion.
And this is to replenish their stockpiles.
Yes, this acquisition is necessary to replenish stockpiles that were depleted during a confrontation with Pakistan earlier this year. And this just reinforces those long-standing, very robust India-Russia defense ties. And it's strategically timed just ahead of President Putin's upcoming visit to India.
All right, let's turn our attention now to the United Kingdom, where the Labour Party is facing a major crisis of credibility over what is being called a monumental U-turn on worker rights.
This was a flagship commitment in their election manifesto. They promised to grant workers protection from unfair dismissal starting on their first day of employment.
A day one right.
The day one right. Now, Labor has reversed course. They've stated they will only implement this protection after a 6-month probationary period.
And the defense from the government, from Minister Bridget Phillipson, was that this was a pragmatic decision.
She argued it was a necessary compromise, to balance the needs of employers with the broader goal of securing widespread economic and social benefits. But of course, this has created predictable political volatility.
How so?
Well, critics on the left are arguing this fundamentally undermines job security and breaks a core promise to voters, leaving new employees highly vulnerable. Supporters, on the other hand, frame it as a responsible compromise necessary for businesses that are operating in a very challenging economic climate.
A classic political trade-off.
It's a classic case where the immediate economic fear seems to outweigh the desired ideological reform.
Meanwhile, the political pressure in the UK regarding immigration remains relentless, even though new data is showing a sharp dip in net migration figures.
The government welcomed the new figures. They report a 69% reduction in long-term net migration for the year ending June 2025. That's the lowest figure in 4 years, although it does follow a record influx the year before.
And the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, she emphasized this was needed to reduce strain on local services.
Right, the strain on local communities and services. That's the government's line.
But the political dynamics on this issue are not slowing down at all.
Not one bit. Despite that reduction, the right-wing Reform UK Party, which is led by Nigel Farage, continues to gain significant traction in the polls. And that ensures that immigration remains the central, highly volatile political battleground in the UK.
And there was action taken regarding the English Channel crossings.
Yes, in a related move aimed at reducing those arrivals, the UK Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, successfully pressured French President Emmanuel Macron to enhance border control measures and step up interceptions of the small boats that are crossing the English Channel.
Okay, across the Atlantic, immigration rhetoric in the U.S. has intensified dramatically, and this follows a tragic shooting incident in Washington, D.C. that involved members of the National Guard.
President Trump announced plans to permanently pause migration from what he controversially termed third world countries. And that phrase was immediately and widely criticized as being outdated and offensive.
And this rhetoric was directly fueled by the outcome of that shooting incident.
That is correct. The suspect in the D.C. shooting was identified as an Afghan national, and it turns out he had previously worked alongside the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, having been recruited into something called the Kandahar Strike Force during the conflict in Afghanistan.
And the outcome was tragic.
Terribly tragic. The incident resulted in the death of a 23-year-old National Guard member, Specialist Beckstrom, and it left another in critical condition.
This incident just raises incredibly complex and difficult questions about national security vetting and our humanitarian challenges.
It really does. It highlights the extreme difficulty and the inherent risk that's associated with vetting and then supporting former combatants and allies who are resettled here in the U.S.
And what was the policy response from the White House?
In response, President Trump ordered an immediate comprehensive review of green card holders from 19 countries of concern, which includes Afghanistan, Iran, and Somalia. And he stated his intention to deport non-citizens who are deemed to be security liabilities.
And this has obviously caused alarm among advocacy groups.
Immigrant and human rights advocates are deeply alarmed. They're warning that this policy could unfairly and unjustly target lawful residents and that it threatens the potential revocation of residency status, particularly for those Afghan allies who placed their own lives at risk to assist U.S. forces and were then resettled here under special programs.
So a tragic incident is now fueling this intensely polarized political debate.
Yes, about the efficacy of our current immigration systems and our veteran support systems.
Okay, we have a major precedent-setting case that's challenging democratic integrity unfolding in South Korea.
This is a big one. The former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo is facing a recommended 15-year prison sentence for aiding insurrection. And this is linked to the controversial martial law decree that was issued by the now-impeached president, Yoon Suk-yeol.
And this is the first time this has happened.
This prosecution is the first case of its kind in South Korea's entire democratic history.
So it's a fundamental test of the nation's commitment to democratic principles against, well, authoritarian overreach.
It sets a critical legal and political precedent. The prosecution views that martial law declaration as a blatant attack on democracy, and the outcome of this trial will really dictate the level of accountability that's required for high-level political and military figures who are implicated in any attempt to undermine constitutional rule.
Shifting to religious doctrine, the Vatican has issued a new note clarifying its definition of marriage.
Signed by Pope Leo XIV, the Vatican has reaffirmed that marriage is an exclusive, lifelong union between one man and one woman. The document explicitly rejects both polygamy and polyamory, stating that they are incompatible with fundamental church principles of equality and mutual belonging.
And this guidance is aimed at addressing pastoral concerns in specific global regions.
That's right. It's particularly relevant in areas like Africa, where polygamous marriages are still prevalent in some cultures. It's meant to provide guidance to the bishops there. The document celebrates monogamy, but it's important to note it deliberately avoids addressing other highly contentious issues within the church, such as same-sex relationships or divorce.
We also have two examples of elections and political crackdowns that are being monitored internationally. First, let's go to Honduras.
Honduras is heading toward crucial elections on November 30th, and it's happening amidst deep polarization, pre-election political violence that has resulted in fatalities, and serious allegations of fraud and military interference.
So international observers are there.
Both the European Union, the EU, and the Organization of American States, the OAS, are closely monitoring the integrity of the voting process. And that's specifically due to scrutiny over the military potentially overstepping its constitutional bounds in the political process.
And we also have a concerning political crackdown happening in Tunisia.
Yes. A Tunisian court has handed down some extremely severe prison sentences, some up to 35 years, to nearly 40 opposition figures, including some prominent political leaders. Human rights organizations have immediately raised alarms about what they're calling political repression and the rapid diminishing of democratic freedom and the space for dissent under the current government.
Okay, let's move into our final sections on the economy, markets, and then a lighter look at culture. We must start this section with the devastating catastrophe that struck Hong Kong, a fire that resulted in a tragic loss of life and highlights a severe systemic failure of public safety.
The fire at the Wang Fuk Court public housing estate in the Tai Po district was the city's deadliest fire in decades. The scale of the tragedy is just immense. The death toll tragically rose to 128 people, with 89 of those bodies still remaining unidentified. 79 other people were injured.
And the public outrage is palpable because the initial investigations are strongly suggesting that this was entirely preventable. It's linked to renovation safety failures.
Absolutely. The investigation quickly pointed to the use of highly flammable materials during ongoing renovations, and that danger was exacerbated by the use of bamboo scaffolding in this very dense residential structure.
And there have been arrests.
Authorities have arrested multiple individuals, including directors and a consultant from the renovation contractor, on manslaughter charges. The sheer scale of these preventable deaths has forced the authorities to mandate immediate inspections of all similar public housing estates across Hong Kong.
Just a horrific story. Shifting now to climate-related disasters, Southeast Asia was hit by a rare and devastating weather pattern.
Satellite imagery confirmed a rare three-cyclone storm cluster that developed simultaneously, and it caused catastrophic flooding and landslides across the entire region.
A three-cyclone cluster.
It's an extremely rare event, and this extreme weather resulted in a very high casualty count. At least 321 fatalities across Southeast Asia, including 164 in Indonesia alone, primarily on the island of Sumatra.
This really highlights the region's increasing vulnerability to these severe multi-system climate disasters.
It does. It moves the climate discussion from, long-term projections to immediate mass casualty humanitarian crises. And it requires rapid policy and infrastructure adjustments to deal with these increasingly frequent and complex extreme weather events.
All right, let's turn to finance, where the famed investor Michael Burry, who's known for predicting the 2008 housing crisis, is taking a sharply bearish stance against two major tech players.
Burry, who many people know as the big short investor, has purchased substantial put options against both NVIDIA and Palantir Technologies.
And put options, for our listeners, are a bet that the stock price is going to fall.
Exactly. And given his track record, the market is paying very close attention to this skepticism, especially when it comes to NVIDIA.
Why NVIDIA specifically? Their valuation has been just soaring because of the AI boom.
And that's likely the reason. Burry's skepticism signals a belief that NVIDIA's valuation has become overly inflated and detached from its fundamental earnings potential. It seems to be driven largely by speculation and hype around AI. He appears to be signaling a potential correction, or maybe the popping of a minor bubble in that high-flying tech sector.
Conversely, though, we have a cautiously optimistic view on the world's second-largest economy, China.
Right. Sophie Hun, who is a portfolio manager at BNP Paribas Asset Management, she remains constructive on Chinese equities. She views them as excellent diversification opportunities despite all the global uncertainty.
And what is her optimism based on?
It hinges on the expected rebound in domestic consumption in China and the continued push by the government there for sustainable development policies.
Meanwhile, the Hong Kong dollar bond market is setting records.
It is. Hong Kong dollar bond issuance reached a record $42.6 billion US. That's a huge 37% increase. And to explain the financial jargon simply, the main driver here is the decreasing local interest rate. The Hong Kong interbank offered rate, or HIBOR, is at historic lows.
And why does that matter so much?
It matters because the cost of borrowing locally in Hong Kong is now so cheap compared to borrowing in the US dollar, which is still relatively expensive. So international issuers are flocking to the Hong Kong bond market to get cheaper funding, and that's what's driving this record surge. The outlook remains very strong for 2026.
Now, a major accountability story. Apple is facing a lawsuit regarding its supply chain ethics for key minerals.
The human rights advocacy group, IR Advocates, that's International Rights Advocates, they've filed a lawsuit alleging that Apple has misled consumers about responsibly sourcing critical minerals like cobalt and tantalum from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or the DR Congo.
But Apple has made some very strong claims about traceability and ethical sourcing. They've even claimed to use 100% recycled cobalt.
And that is the absolute crux of the claim. The lawsuit alleges that despite Apple's rigorous public claims, their supply chain is still linked to forced labor, child labor, and significant environmental issues in the DR Congo. This lawsuit is seeking to hold the tech giant legally accountable under the Consumer Protection Procedures Act for what the group calls deceptive marketing practices regarding corporate social responsibility.
Let's also highlight the massive anti-corruption drive in Peru, which resulted in 2 former presidents being convicted within 24 hours of each other.
This is just a monumental display of judicial commitment to accountability. The former president, Martin Vizcarra, who served from 2018 to 2020, he received a 14-year sentence for corruption, having accepted bribes of around $676,000 US.
And the other one?
And Pedro Castillo, who was impeached in 2022, he received over 11 years for a failed attempt at a self-coup. This really sets a powerful standard that corruption at the highest levels will face severe and swift enforcement, at least in Peru.
And finally, on the legal front, a UK court decision that prioritized energy security over environmental concerns.
Yes, the court dismissed a legal challenge that was brought against the issuance of new fossil fuel drilling licenses in the North Sea. The ruling effectively greenlights further investment in the UK's fossil fuel sector, prioritizing immediate energy security and economic stability over the environmental degradation concerns that were raised by climate change activists.
Okay, a regulatory fight in the U.S. could significantly impact the burgeoning legal hemp market. What's happening there?
A controversial federal provision was embedded in the most recent budget bill, and it threatens to implement a ban on all THC-infused drinks and snacks. And this provision directly threatens the rapidly growing $24 billion hemp industry, which has really flourished due to state-level legalization.
So the industry is scrambling before this ban takes effect.
They are. Industry advocates, alongside politicians like Minnesota Senators Amy Klobuchar and Ilhan Omar, are actively lobbying to protect the legal market before the ban is scheduled to take effect in November of 2026. It just highlights this ongoing frustrating tension between federal oversight and state-level acceptance of cannabis and hemp products.
And for consumers gearing up for holiday shopping, we have some critical Black Friday strategy tips.
The essential takeaway here is this. Never ever assume a Black Friday tag means you're getting the lowest price. Retailers employ significant psychological tactics, including that artificially manufactured sense of urgency.
So do your homework.
You have to do your homework. Shoppers must research prices ahead of time, compare across multiple retailers, and, crucially, retain your receipts. Even for common household items like, loo roll, as they say in the UK, because some retailers offer post-purchase price adjustments if the item drops further in price later in the season.
Good tip. And finally, travelers to Paris should note that the Louvre is becoming significantly more expensive.
Yes. The Louvre Museum has raised its entry prices by 45% for most non-European Union tourists. And this strategy is designed to generate millions of euros specifically to fund major renovation and upkeep plans for the museum. It reflects a broader trend among major cultural institutions to adjust their pricing much more aggressively for international visitors.
All right, we'll wrap up with a light look at sports and culture, focusing less on the specific scores and more on the structural significance of what's happening. In the UK, we're seeing a major push to use infrastructure to boost women's sports.
That's the key takeaway here. Manchester United's proposed redevelopment of its famous Old Trafford Stadium has been included as a major pillar in the UK's bid for the 2035 Women's World Cup. The goal here is to modernize the facilities and significantly boost the global profile of women's football in the country.
We also have a major cultural debate that originated in Singapore, and it's known as sharenting.
Right. This refers to the practice of parents sharing detailed content about their children's lives online. And the controversy really intensified after a viral video showed a father filming his 12-year-old son opening his primary school leaving examination, or PSLE results. A very high-stakes moment.
And what's the major psychological risks that experts are pointing to here?
Psychologists are warning that while documenting milestones is natural, oversharing these sensitive achievements creates some severe risks. We're talking about emotional harm, public teasing, and just immense unnecessary pressure on children due to peer comparison and unsolicited public commentary.
So it's a call for balance.
It's a call for parents to balance that urge to document with the vital necessity of protecting their children's privacy.
And a quick update on that dramatic Louvre jewel heist in Paris.
France has now charged a fourth suspect, a 39-year-old man with an extensive criminal background. This is in connection with that daring $102 million jewel heist that happened back in October. It suggests a larger, more organized criminal network was involved.
But the jewels are still missing.
Crucially, the stolen jewelry remains missing.
And finally, the political turmoil continues in Pakistan regarding the former Prime Minister, Imran Khan.
His younger son, Qasim Khan, has made a highly public and pretty shocking allegation that his father is being held in death cell isolation with, he says, no proof of life. He's demanding immediate transparency from the government amidst the severe political instability that's gripping the country.
What a dense and, truly diverse deep dive this has been.
Yeah.
Moving from these profound scientific advancements, like that HIV antibody that could just revolutionize global health, all the way to the fundamental challenges that are facing democracy, accountability, and the future of technology regulation.
I think the unifying theme, if there is one, is the intersection of this unprecedented technological acceleration, whether it's autonomous defense systems, AI, new breakthroughs in cellular biology, and the enduring human challenge of accountability.
Right.
We saw accountability as the bottleneck everywhere, whether it was in the form of corruption in Ukraine, military conduct in the Middle East, or those tragic safety failures in public housing in Hong Kong.
So if we look back at this incredible snapshot of global life that we've just gone through, we learned that a single scientific discovery could rewrite HIV treatment protocols for the entire planet. And yet, simultaneously, we learned that the pollution in your city might be rendering your current healthy lifestyle choice ineffective. So, given that rapidly evolving nature of both biological and environmental threats, we want to leave you with this provocative thought. How much of our future health, our success, and our safety will be determined by the individual choices that we make today, like where we choose to exercise or what we consume, and how much of it is already fixed by global regulatory policies on air quality, on technology standards, and on political accountability.
And what specific knowledge that you gain today will most influence how you navigate your own city and how you plan your own future tomorrow?
Keep connecting those dots.
Absolutely.
And join us next time for the deep dive.
Enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.